Police dog won't stop digging in shelter yard. What they found left everyone in shock. Since morning, it has been digging non-stop in the corner of the yard near the fence, its sharp claws scratching the ground, its nose sniffing constantly, its eyes focused as if it was hunting. "Blitz, stop! You're destroying the yard," Anna called. But Blitz didn't listen, barking lowly, continuing to scratch harder, curious and worried. Anna knelt down and observed. The ground under Blitz's claws sank deep, revealing a piece of shiny metal. "What is this?" Anna whispered, her heart pounding. She took a small shovel from the tool shed and helped Blitz dig. What secrets will Anna and Blitz discover? Don't miss the next developments. Click subscribe, like, and listen to the whole story to uncover this mystery with us. The scream wasn't human, but it cut Lena to her core. It was a high-pitched, desperate wail, followed by a deep, angry growl. Lightning. Her heart skipped a beat. She dropped the hose she was using to spray the dusty concrete floors of the kennel and ran. The sound came from the back run, a neglected piece of land on the edge of the Freedom Animal Shelter near the old rusted fence that bordered an overgrown forest. As she rounded the corner of the main building, her blood ran cold. Blitz, the retired German Shepherd K9 whose gray muzzle and dignified posture usually exuded a stoic calm, was out of his mind. He was tearing at the earth, throwing clumps of dirt meters behind him, his muscles flexing beneath his black and brown fur. His eyes, usually so wise and calm, were wide and filled with a fierce intensity. Beside the growing hole lay something oblong and dark, wrapped in shredded fabric, vaguely resembling a small branch. But the color was wrong. Too pale, almost ivory in one exposed area, and the smell that wafted toward her now earthy, musty, but with an underlying, sweetly putrid note that made her stomach churn. Blitz let out that blood-curdling wail again before digging again with furious energy, as if he were trying to open the gates of hell. Another employee, the young intern Finn, stood petrified by, his face ashen, a rusty shovel limp in his hand. He stared at what Blitz had partially uncovered, and then at Lena with panicked eyes. I don't know," he stammered. "He just started." Blitz completely ignored them both, obsessed with his terrible work. Lena swallowed, her mouth suddenly dry as dust. What on earth had the dog found there? Dr. Lena Hansen, 28 years old, had only been the chief veterinarian and deputy director of the Freiheit Animal Shelter on the outskirts of Dresden for 6 months. The shelter itself was a relic of a bygone era, a collection of old, slightly dilapidated brick buildings and functional structures in desperate need of renovation. Funding was chronically tight, donations were limited, and the small team of permanent staff and volunteers often worked to the point of exhaustion. Nevertheless, Lena loved her work, the gratitude in the eyes of a rescued animal, the successful placement of an animal in a new home. That was what drove her. Her daily routine consisted of vaccinations, castrations, and the treatment of illnesses and injuries, as well as long hours in the office, planning budgets and desperately searching for funding. Mr. Alwyn Gruber, the longtime director of the animal shelter, was an old-school man, over 60, often grumpy and skeptical of Lena's modern approaches, but at heart an animal lover who had dedicated his life to the shelter. However, he was also known for his keenness to sweep problems under the rug, so as not to further jeopardize the already tarnished reputation of Freiheit. Blitz came to the shelter about 2 months ago. His former police officer had died unexpectedly, and the family couldn't keep the demanding male, despite his imposing appearance and his past as a sniffer dog. Blitz was a gentle giant, spending most of his time lying quietly in his kennel or patrolling the outdoor enclosure with dignity. Lena quickly developed a special bond with him. His intelligent eyes often seemed to understand more than one might suspect, and sometimes, when she felt unobserved, she would tell him about her worries about the shelter. He was a quiet, comforting companion in this often chaotic environment. The atmosphere at the shelter was a mixture of bustling activity and latent tension. The old buildings creaked under their weight. There was always too few staff or too many animals, and rumors often churned about unpaid bills or the next official inspection. Lena tried to spread optimism, develop new ideas for fundraising events, and modernize medical care. But she often encountered the inertia of the system and Gruber's conservative attitude. There were unspoken stories about the old days of the shelter, vague hints of past crises that never became concrete. A kind of invisible shadow hung over the place that Lena couldn't quite grasp. The shock of the sight in the rear runoff area quickly gave way to a cold, professional clarity. Lena forced herself to breathe calmly. "Finn, get Mr. Gruber immediately and tell him to call the police. Nobody touches anything here." Her voice trembled slightly, but it sounded firm. Finn nodded silently and hurried away, visibly relieved to be able to escape the immediate scene. Lena carefully knelt down some distance from the hole. Blitz was still digging, but his movements were slower, more exhausted. He whimpered softly. The exposed object was definitely not an animal bone. It was too straight. The proportions seemed human, even though it was small, a child's bone. The thought made her shudder. The shredded piece of fabric next to it, could it have been clothing? "Lightning, stop!" she commanded in a firm voice. The dog paused, looked at her with a panting tongue and desperate eyes, then back at the hole. "Come here, my dear." Slowly, hesitantly, he backed away from the pit and trotted toward her. She scratched him behind the ears, feeling his body tremble. What had caused him to panic so much? His K-9 training had been years ago, but his instincts were obviously still razor-sharp. Had he encountered a scent he associated with danger or death? Mr. Gruber arrived, out of breath, his face a mixture of disbelief and anger. "What on earth is going on here? Hansen, Finn's stammering about." He trailed off as his gaze fell on the hole and what lay within. His face turned an unhealthy gray. "Police, have you gone crazy? This could be anything. An old animal carcass that someone illegally buried." "I don't believe that, Mr. Gruber," Lena said calmly but firmly. "And even if it does, it needs to be properly investigated. I take full responsibility. But we have to inform the police." Mr. Gruber stared at her, then back at the hole. He seemed to be struggling with himself. The potential publicity, a scandal. But the sight was undeniably disturbing. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "Very well, but if this is a red herring, Hansen." Lena's immediate goal was clear: find out what Blitz had discovered and ensure the situation was handled correctly and transparently. The fear of the consequences for the shelter was there, but the need to do the right thing outweighed it. She felt a mixture of dread, nausea, and a strange, inexplicable determination. Blitz had uncovered something that couldn't be ignored. 2 hours later, the rear enclosure of the Freiheit animal shelter was cordoned off with red and white tape. 2 uniformed police officers secured the area, while a forensic technician in a white jumpsuit meticulously examined the site. Chief Inspector Jürgen Behrendt, an experienced middle-aged investigator with tired eyes and a stoic expression, questioned Lena and Mr. Gruber. "So your dog, Blitz, suddenly started digging for no apparent reason?" asked Behrendt, examining Lena critically. "He was very agitated, almost panicked," Lena explained. "He's a former police K-9 dog. I assume he smelled something." Mr. Gruber intervened, clearly trying to downplay the situation. "Probably a dead wild animal that dug its way under the fence. We border the forest. These things happen." Behrendt nodded slowly, not hiding his skepticism. "We'll see." He turned back to Lena. "How long has the dog been with you?" "About 2 months. He came to us after his former employer passed away." The initial investigation on site yielded little concrete information, except that the bone fragment was most likely a human bone, possibly from a child or adolescent. Officials began carefully removing the soil around the original hole. After another hour, they encountered something hard and metallic. Using brushes and small shovels, they uncovered a rusted, dented metal box, about the size of a shoebox. The lid was corroded, but still intact. Blitz, who had been waiting restlessly in a makeshift enclosure within sight the whole time, began to bark again when the box came into view. "Interesting," murmured Behrendt, instructing one of his men to carefully secure the box. Complications weren't long in coming. Mr. Gruber became increasingly nervous and tried to hamper the investigation by complaining about the effort involved and the disruption to the shelter's operations. "This casts a bad light on us. Who will want to donate or adopt an animal now if the police are messing around?" Lena tried to mediate between Gruber and Behrendt, providing all the information she had and offering her cooperation. She sensed the growing hostility of some long-time employees who shared Gruber's fears and viewed her as a troublemaker. News of the discovery had spread like wildfire among the staff and volunteers, and rumors were rife. Late in the afternoon, the tin box was opened at the police station. The contents were not what Lena had expected: no weapons, no drugs. Instead, they contained carefully wrapped children's toys, a small, worn teddy bear, a set of colorful wooden blocks, and a hand-painted picture of a smiling sun. Underneath lay a single, yellowed photograph. It showed a young girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, with a radiant smile and a missing front tooth. She was holding a small puppy in her arms that bore a striking resemblance to Blitz when she was young. On the back of the photograph, written in a child's scrawling handwriting, was just one word: Sophie. The discovery of the photo with the name Sophie and the children's toys in the tin box changed everything. Chief Inspector Behrendt immediately ordered a review of old missing persons cases in the Dresden area that matched the girl's description. Forensic examination of the bone fragment confirmed the horrific suspicion it was part of a human femur, presumably from a child between 6 and 10 years old. The time it had been missing was estimated at approximately 15 to 20 years. 2 days later, the breakthrough came. A case was discovered in the archives: Sophie Weber, 8 years old, who had disappeared in the summer of 18 years ago. She was the daughter of a former employee of the Freiheit Animal Shelter. According to the files, she had been playing on the premises during an open day and had disappeared without a trace. Despite an intensive search, she was never found. The case was eventually filed as unsolved. It was suspected that it was either a kidnapping or a hit-and-run accident on the nearby country road. The animal shelter was officially declared a crime scene. Other areas of the property were cordoned off, and a team of archaeologists and forensic experts began systematic excavations. Mr. Gruber was furious, but the evidence was overwhelming. Lena felt a mixture of horror and deep sadness. A child had disappeared here on the property, possibly died, and all these years no one had known or suspected anything. Or had they? For Lena, this was the point of no return. It was no longer just about a strange discovery or the animal shelter's reputation. It was about a dead child, a possible cover-up, and justice for Sophie. Her initial goal of handling the situation correctly transformed into a deeper, personal commitment to bringing the truth to light. The media had gotten wind of the matter. The first headlines appeared, "Bone discovery at animal shelter. Old crime uncovered." The pressure on everyone involved grew immensely. Lena looked at Blitz, who lay quietly in his kennel, but watched her with alert eyes. Had he instinctively sensed the resting place of a child? Or was there a deeper connection she didn't yet understand? The puppy in the photo? Could that really have been Blitz? 18 years was a long time for a dog, but the resemblance was striking. If Blitz had really been here as a puppy at the time of Sophie's disappearance, the thought was almost too unbelievable, but his behavior, his tenacity in digging, spoke a language of its own. She decided she could no longer just stand by and watch passively. She had to find out more about what had happened back then, about Sophie, about the people who had worked at the animal shelter back then. Mr. Gruber continued to stonewall, but Lena was determined to find answers. The next few days were characterized by a tense atmosphere. The animal shelter resembled a besieged fort. Police officers and forensic experts came and went. Reporters lurked outside the gate. Regular work with the animals suffered under the circumstances, although Lena and the remaining team did their best to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Lena began her own research. She sifted through old animal shelter archives, whenever they still existed and were accessible, sparse, dusty files that raised more questions than they answered. She spoke with Martha, the oldest employee, a cat keeper who had worked at Freiheit for over 30 years and was considered the shelter's walking memory. Martha was initially reserved, but when Lena showed her Sophie's photo, her eyes filled with tears. "Ah, yes, little Sophie," Martha murmured. She was a ray of sunshine. Her mother, Clara Weber, worked here in administration. After Sophie's disappearance, Clara fell apart. She quit soon after and moved away. No one ever heard from her again. Martha recounted the terrible summer 18 years ago, the panic, the futile search. Mr. Gruber wasn't a manager back then, just a simple employee, the boss at the time. Mr. Meissner was a tough guy. He wanted to avoid a scandal at all costs. Chief Inspector Barrett, who had initially treated Lena with professional distance, began to appreciate her persistence and local knowledge. She provided him with names of former colleagues that Martha had remembered and helped unravel the convoluted relationships and hierarchies of the time. A cautious collaboration characterized by mutual respect emerged. Mr. Gruber, on the other hand, became increasingly unapproachable. He avoided Lena and Barrett whenever possible. Lena suspected that he knew more than he was letting on, or at least carried a heavy burden from the past. Perhaps it was the fear that old mistakes or cover-ups might come to light that made him act this way. Blitz continued to play a quiet but important role. During excavations on the site, he was occasionally called upon by officials. He reacted particularly strongly to a particular area near an old, disused well shaft that had been filled with construction debris and covered with earth years ago, exactly where he had originally dug. The archaeologists now focused their work on this area. Lena felt increasingly isolated by some of her colleagues who accused her of bringing disaster to the animal shelter. Doubts gnawed at her. Was she doing the right thing, or was she reopening old wounds that should have been left alone? But the thought of Sophie and the unsolved mystery of her disappearance haunted her. She formulated a new plan. She had to find Clara Weber, Sophie's mother. Perhaps she could shed some light on the situation. With Barron's help, she managed to locate a possible last known address for Clara Weber in a small town in Bavaria. It was a lifeline, but one she had to grasp. After days of painstaking work, excavations at the old well shaft unearthed further shocking discoveries, some small weathered items of clothing that clearly belonged to a child. And finally, deep within the shaft, more human bones. The sad certainty grew stronger. This was Sophie's grave. The only question remained how she got there. Accident, crime. Lena decided to travel to Bavaria to look for Clara Weber. Mr. Gruber tried to talk her out of it, arguing that it would be irresponsible to abandon the animal shelter in such a situation. But Lena was undeterred. Barrett discreetly supported her decision, as official investigations in this direction had not yet been authorized. For Lena, the trip was both an escape and a mission. She needed distance from the oppressive atmosphere of the animal shelter and sincerely hoped that Clara Weber was still alive and willing to talk. After a long drive and some searching, she found herself standing in front of a small, modest house with a neglected garden. A woman opened the door, ravaged by grief, but with eyes that bore a distant resemblance to those in Sophie's photo. It was Clara Weber. The conversation was painful. Clara had never stopped grieving for Sophie, but had tried to come to terms with the past. When Lena told her about the finds at the animal shelter and about Blitz, the dog who kept digging, Clara broke down. She told her story through tears. On that open day, Sophie had been playing illegally near the old well shaft, which at the time was only loosely covered. Clara believed Sophie had fallen in when she was unobserved. When she realized her daughter was missing and began searching, the then animal shelter director, Meissner, put pressure on her. An accident on the premises, especially one with a fatal outcome, would have meant the end of the animal shelter. Meissner, Clara's tearful suspicion, had secretly thrown the child's body deeper into the shaft and then had it quickly and discreetly filled in to cover everything up. He had sworn Clara to tell her she had disappeared off-site and threatened to lose her job if she told the truth. She was young at the time, desperate, traumatized, and had succumbed to the pressure, a decision she regretted for the rest of her life. Shortly after the incident, she had secretly buried the tin box containing Sophie's belongings nearby as a kind of desperate memorial, in the vague hope that the truth would one day come to light. And Blitz, yes, Blitz had been her puppy back then, a gift for Sophie a few weeks before her death. After Sophie's disappearance, Clara hadn't been able to keep him and, with a heavy heart, had given him to an acquaintance, a police officer who later had him trained as a service dog. It was an incredible coincidence that now, after all these years, he had returned to the place of his earliest imprinting, back in Dresden. Lena confronted Inspector Barrett with Clara's statement. Mr. Meissner had since passed away, but there were other former employees from that time. Mr. Gruber was also questioned again, under pressure from the new findings and Lena's urgent plea to finally come clean. He broke his silence. He had been a young nurse at the time, intimidated by Meissner and forced to assist in the cover-up. The guilt had consumed him all these years. It was a moment of dark night of the soul for Lena. The truth was terrible, banal in its tragedy, yet so devastating in its consequences. An accident, covered up out of fear and selfishness. She looked at Blitz, who was looking at her with his wise eyes. Without his inexplicable urge to dig, Sophie's fate might have remained a mystery forever. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Clara's testimony, Gruber's late confession, and the forensic evidence painted a clear picture of Sophie's tragic death and the subsequent cover-up. Since the person primarily responsible, former animal shelter director Meissner, had already died, the criminal investigation focused on the surviving accomplices and aides in the cover-up, including Mr. Gruber, who now faced charges of obstruction of justice and disturbing the peace of the dead. The real climax, however, was not legal, but emotional. Clara Weber came to Dresden, to the Freiheit Animal Shelter. It was the first time in 18 years that she had set foot in the place that had caused her so much suffering. Lena led her to the now completely exposed well shaft. Next to it, in a cordoned-off area, lay Blitz. When Clara saw him, her breath caught in her throat. That's really him," she whispered. She slowly approached the dog. Blitz raised his head, his ears pricked up. He sniffed, and then, as if guided by an invisible memory, he let out a soft whine and gently licked Clara's outstretched hand. Tears streamed down Clara's face as she hugged the old dog, who had been her daughter's playmate as a puppy and who had now, almost miraculously, helped to shed light on her fate. The scene was one of quiet, deep emotion. Police officers, animal shelter staff, even the usually stoic Inspector Barrett watched with moved expressions. The truth had come to light, not through spectacular police work alone, but through the unerring instincts of an animal and the tenacity of a young veterinarian. The immediate aftermath of the climax was a tremor that reverberated through Dresden and the animal welfare community. Mr. Gruber was suspended and later given a suspended sentence. The Freiheit Animal Shelter was on the verge of closure, but Blitz's story and the uncovered truth also had another effect. A wave of sympathy and donations swept through. People were shocked by the past, but also deeply touched by the dog's loyalty and Lena's dedication. Under Lena's interim leadership and with the support of a newly established foundation, the difficult process of rebuilding and reforming the animal shelter began. Transparency and ethical conduct were declared the highest priorities. Sophie Weber finally received a dignified burial. A small memorial garden was created at the site of the old well shaft, with a simple plaque commemorating Sophie and the dog who had not forgotten her. Blitz became a local hero. Reporters called him the K9 with the sixth sense. Lena officially adopted him. He spent his final years by her side, surrounded by love and care. Every evening before leaving the shelter, Lena walked with Blitz to Sophie's memorial plaque. She stroked his silver-gray fur and whispered, "You brought her home, my dear." The Freedom Animal Shelter slowly recovered. It became a symbol that the truth, even if painful, can ultimately be healing. The horrors of the past hadn't been erased, but the community had learned to face them. And Lena knew she had found her calling not just as a veterinarian, but as a guardian of the vulnerable and a voice for those without one of their own. The old German shepherd at her side was living proof of this. The shock caused by Blitz's discovery had given way to deep, thoughtful sadness, but also to a new hope for honesty and justice.